Let's throw some hands. It's been over a year since the last Sketchy impressions, so it's about time I fix that. When the Nintendo Switch had its big expo back in January, the game that caught my interest more than anything else was their newest IP, ARMS, a fighting game utilizing the Switch's Joy-Con mechanics. Fighting games are my favorite video game genre, hands down, and I decided that if I was gonna get a Switch for any game, this was gonna be it. So let's find out if it was worth the investment. Putting a clever spin on the fighting game formula, ARMS has players duking it out with characters that have extendable springs attached to them. In a way, this could be seen as a spiritual successor to Punch-Out, with more emphasis placed on mobility and weapon variety, as you can customize your arms with different weapons that have various effects when charged up, like paralyzing your opponent or deflecting oncoming attacks. As of this video, there are 11 playable characters, with one having been released as free DLC just last month. Each character starts out with 3 of the 33 available arm types, and the characters all have their own unique trait. For example, Springman gains a permanent power boost when his health drops below 25%, and Min Min can deflect punches with her air dodge. Nintendo did a great job at catering to a variety of different playstyles, and there's bound to be at least one character that fits your preference. Each fight is a standard best 2 out of 3 battle, and before every round you can choose which arm you want to equip. But despite its appearances, ARMS is no gimmicky fighter. Within the first hour, I quickly realized that it's one of those games that's easy to learn, but hard to master. If you walk into this game thinking that mindlessly throwing punches is gonna win you matches, you're in for a rude awakening, as even the medium difficulties will leave you getting your ass beat multiple times. That's not to say that the game is unfair though, it's just not as simple as it appears to be. Once you get the hang of the mechanics and learn the ins and outs through practice, they'll begin to get exponentially better. As far as controls go, ARMS gives you many different ways to play. While the motion controls were the main focus of the advertising and they do work surprisingly well, you also have the option of using the Joy-Con grip, the Pro Controller, or even a single Joy-Con sideways, so even if you just bought a Switch and can't shell out the money for the obscenely expensive controllers, you can still play with a friend. My one hang-up with the controls is how blocking works. For some reason, instead of having it mapped to a button, you have to click the left stick to block, so you have to interrupt the flow of your movements in order to stop an oncoming attack. It's a very strange choice, especially considering that the L button is just sitting there with no functions mapped to it, so why have such an awkward setup? In a game where mobility is an even more important element to winning fights than it is in other fighting games, it's rather counterintuitive to have the block function mapped this way, and it makes blocking not even worth doing in most cases. In spite of that though, the combat is solid. It's fun to play when you first try it out, and then when you sink your teeth into the fundamentals, that's when the real fun starts. When it comes to game modes, you don't really need much for a fighting game, and my fear was that Nintendo wasn't gonna feel confident in their product and stuff a bunch of extra unnecessary modes. But thankfully, ARMS plays it straight, and it gives you your basic fighting game essentials. You have Grand Prix, which is the standard arcade ladder mode, casual and ranked online matches, friend matches, local battles, and last but not least, Versus, which comes with a generous amount of modes to choose from, including regular fights, team fights, 1 vs 100, training, and more. Every fight earns you points. The more difficult the fight, the more points you get, and you use these points to buy additional arms, but the way the system is implemented isn't all that great. See, you don't actually buy arms, you buy chances to get arms. The way it works is that you select a character, then play a mini game where you have to punch targets, collecting arms along the way. Here's the problem though. Firstly, the arms you gain are completely random, so you have no idea what you're getting. This is made even worse by the fact that all the characters have to unlock arms individually, meaning that if you have a favorite weapon and 2 favorite characters, both characters have to unlock that one weapon. This would be slightly alleviated if the weapon drops were influenced by the character that you use to get them, but they aren't. So it's possible to play the minigame as Springman, but get a weapon for Helix. What's that? You don't play Helix? Well, too bad. You're now stuck with a weapon for a character you don't even use. And as if all that wasn't bad enough, it's also possible to get an arm that you already have. Sure, getting a duplicate of an arm you already have does boost that arm's power, but it makes an already tedious game mode even more so. the negatives outweigh the positives. The Get Arms feature is the one mode in the game that is objectively bad, with the risk versus reward factor leaning heavily towards the side of risk. Why not just have players buy each weapon directly, with the more powerful weapons being more expensive? Making this mode a system of random drops with the possibility of getting duplicates leads to players having to tediously grind for points. Add to that the amount of points you need to play this mode compared to how slowly you get those points. It's a pretty cheap way of artificially lengthening the game's replay value. And the really scary part is that once more characters and more arms come out, this mode will become even more of a slog. Thankfully, the rest of the modes make the game fun enough so that grinding for points isn't as much of a hassle as it could be. ARMS is nothing if not stylish. I have a big preference for bright, vibrant color palettes, and this game has more than enough color to spare. The visual and sound effects make landing a charged punch and pulling off the flashy rush attacks feel incredibly satisfying. I really appreciate the effort put into each character's design, with Kid Cobra, Min Min, and Twintel being my favorites visually. Each character has their own stage that caters to their fighting style, and like most classic fighting games, they all have their own musical theme, each suiting their personalities. They even have established ages, bios, and backstories. It's a nice little touch that, while not necessarily needed, is much appreciated. The whole sporting event vibe gives ARMS a very upbeat tone, and it's all topped off by a kick-ass theme song. Nintendo knocked it out of the park with this one. Fighting games can be pretty hard to get right, as a lot of them are either too technical for newcomers or too simple to be played past the casual level, but ARMS manages to hit that sweet spot of being able to cater to both the casual and competitive crowds. It's one of those few fighters that I can see both at a party with friends and at a competitive tournament. In fact, EVO actually considered it for their 2017 tournament lineup, and EVO is a very big event in the fighting game community, so if this game is getting recognition for something that big, that speaks volumes about its appeal. While the game will be regularly updated with free DLC characters and weapons, it doesn't feel like an incomplete game at launch like the first Splatoon, or to use a more relevant example, Street Fighter V. Really, the only thing keeping me from giving ARMS a perfect recommendation is the Get Arms minigame. But there's so much good here that I can still say it's one of the best games on the Switch, even if the library is admittedly small. And for fighting game fans especially, it's something to watch out for. So what are your thoughts on this game? Swarm that comment section below or bug me on social media, and consider supporting me through Patreon or PayPal art commissions. Until next time, keep it sketchy, folks.